Welcome to the 10th Genie Out of the Bottle Generation Politics. With our Genie Out of the Bottle, we ask you to reflect on the following question. How do we, the current generation, shape the future for the unborn generations of tomorrow? Today, our Genie Out of the Bottle is Maxim Vandekerckhove. Maxim is together ambassador of the Socialist and Democrats group in the European Parliament. Since 2017, the S&D Group assembled a group of 30 youth who will represent the youth on the highest politics and diplomatic spheres in the European Parliament. Maxim was chosen amongst 35 other youth participants of different political backgrounds to present the youth agenda on the EU-Africa Head of State Summit in Ivory Coast. And on this note, I give the floor to you, Maxim.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm first going to share my screen again. Perfect.
Yes.
So I'm actually not going to talk as somebody from the S&D group. I'm just going to reflect on some issues with European elections, some issues with how can people relate to the European elections, and how can we make sure that the future generation is more committed to the European ID, which they actually are. You will see in the numbers of the previous European elections in 2019 that there actually are more young people who are committed to it. So that's a positive thing to start with. Of course, the European elections have in general a bad reputation, and a lot of people say that voting won't change anything. It's those people in Brussels who just talk about the general topics, and for many of them, the value of the EU is unclear, and this also translates into voting they actually vote the same as in the national elections. They just vote pro or against national issues. And this is, of course, a common problem that Europe is dealing with for a very long time. One of the main reasons is also the lack of enthusiasm from national parties, actually. Even in Belgium, I see in my own political party, even this is in the middle spectrum of the political landscape, is that even those politicians here in Belgium that is so close to the center of the European institutions, that they say, well, one of our party presidents literally said, I don't have anything good to say about Europe because Europe doesn't produce any votes. This was a progressive party leader who said that. So for me, as a young, dedicated European, it's very hard to hear that even in parties who are supposed to be pro-European, or at least who have the nuance to distinguish the good from the bad sides, that they say this kind of things. And people need to realize that the future of their countries is strongly related to the European Union, and as most of the legislation is made there. And as I said, sometimes people from the south of Europe say, oh, Europe is far away from our bad side, but also for Belgians, it is apparently the case. And in some recent years, the European Union has indeed shown some insufficient solidarity actually to jointly approach some issues, for example, the migration issue, for which there can actually be no national solution. And of course, forgetting these things plays the right-wing anti-European powers in the hand, of course. Let me start with the first slide of the 2019 European election turnout, where you see that because of the increase of young voters, for the first time since 1994, we had more than 50% of the people who went voting, which is of course still quite a low amount of votes, but it is at least an increase. And to be honest, the center parties in the European spectrum can be very, very glad that they had this increase in young voters, because this actually allowed them to stay in power with their grand coalition. So I also hope in their mindset, and this is also actually a comment that I give towards my own group and towards my own party, that we don't need to become, that we don't need to relax again, These young people know the importance of Europe. They voted for us. They voted for, let's say, the pro-European normal parties, and we cannot let them down now. We cannot say, okay, it's fine. Everyone before the elections was very afraid that the extremist parties would win a lot of seats in the European Parliament. This is actually not the case. Also, like the Green Party won, so it's the Liberals won quite significantly. So this is a good thing, but this is one very strong call towards my own group. Please include these young people like they did with us. Please include them, because they are the ones that cannot be, after a couple of years, they cannot say, oh, Europe didn't do anything for me, even though I gave my vote as a young person. I got nothing in return. Europe didn't become any better. Now it's the time that we are still in power, that the extremist parties are not that extreme in the European Parliament yet, to make sure that we create a new strong story. Just some top drivers for the European vote. So to my own surprise, actually, immigration was only 34% of the main topics that people were worried about. And of course, economy and growth was the first one, followed by climate change. So this also means that in the general spectrum, there is a lot of work on many different topics. So actually, for every party, there is something in it. So we all have, with all the parties in the European Parliament, we have the same issues that we can all tackle, and that we can all win. We can all win on our own specific issues. So it's important to work together on that, on these common European topics. When Europe started, there was actually a focus on specific European integration. So it was, everyone agreed on the fact that Europe was the right way to go, and there were only a few issues about should it be more social, should it be more liberal, but everyone knew that this was the future. Nowadays, there is a shift towards the politicization of every single aspect, also of national politics, and this was also increased by identity politics. This was mainly created by different shocks in society, the Euro crisis, the Brexit, and for sure the COVID crisis. And then you saw that it was no longer a matter of working together on a political integration and, of course, losing a bit of your national sovereignty. No, every single aspect of things that you can't deal with on a national level, or that is wrong because of your national politics, is now being transferred into a political contestation against the EU. Brexit is the best example of that, but also, for example, in Italy, with bad budgetary governance, everything was shifted to the EU, and the EU is the one who is doing wrong. And the COVID crisis is a good example of that, because it's always easy to blame the EU, but actually there has never been a transfer of power for these medical and these for these medical related issues. And then when you see that those national leaders prefer to be national heroes, close their borders so easily, and that the European Union cannot do anything against that, this will only increase Euroscepticism. And maybe this is something that we can debate about afterwards. Is I actually would like to pose a question. If you think that the COVID crisis, certainly for young people, will let them feel that Europe is important, and that after the COVID crisis they will be more pro-European because they know that this is their ticket for freedom? Or do you think that the COVID crisis will show them that Europe is not strong enough on these topics when it needs to be strong in a crisis? Do you think that they will believe their national leaders, and that they prefer a strong hero, national hero, that doesn't give a shit about Europe? For example, now my own prime minister in Belgium, if we can be so open, that he just closes the national borders for people. He imposes high fines if you cross a border. But what is a border nowadays? It's just a line that has been drawn in the past, and now we are living in the Schengen area. And of course, in a sanitary crisis, you can still use your border to do checks. You can still use it as a place where you put a nasal swab into people's noses. That's perfectly fine. You need to do it somewhere. For my part, if I need to travel to Brussels within my own country, even then I don't have any problem that when I arrive in Brussels, I have a nasal swab. You need to do it somewhere. But to go back to these national borders just because there is a line, for example, I'm living 10 kilometers from the Dutch border. I cannot travel 10 kilometers to the right, but I can travel 200 kilometers to the left just because there is a border there. So this has nothing to do with the sanitary crisis. And if we want young people and the society in general to be more pro-European, we need to stop doing these kind of shit, let's be honest. Of course, the focus is mostly on national issues, and this is backed by the media. It's the fact that there is like a permissive consensus on the integration policies, and these things in the past have progressively vanished, and because of that, citizens express their polarized attitudes towards the EU. And because of this focus on national issues, you see that governments are able to claim their superior competence to defend the national interests within the EU. And there is no room anymore for pan-European ideas, like the initial thought of the European integration, where like, let's say, the founding fathers of the EU discussed the broad topics of making a social Europe, making an economic free Europe. And nowadays in our media, there is no room anymore to do that. And we are stuck in, once again, these national heroes who show, look, we can defend our national interests within the EU. And that's also the only thing we will do, because there is, for us, no reason to discuss big topics. The intergovernmentalism is far from what it's supposed to go to towards supranationalism. You still see that the Council of Ministers block the real reforms that need to be done. And as long as this is the case, we can never talk about supranationalism. And when we have a crisis, because of that, it is so easy to fly back towards your national laws and your national superiority, basically. Why did we return towards more nationalism? Well, I guess it's because the EU didn't put its priorities straight. For example, the Green Deal, that's actually a good example, where priorities are not always exclusive. What people see is that, okay, Europe doesn't work for me. They have good ideas with renewable energy. They have good ideas with new forms of transportation. But mostly nowadays, this only means that people who cannot afford a new car will pay more taxes. People who cannot afford to travel green need to pay more taxes. And as long as we don't realize that this is what the media picks out, and of course, not all those things are true, but it is a fact that sometimes the policies of the European Union are only good as a general ID. And it's a bit the same with the SDGs from the United Nations. The IDs are very, very good, but sometimes when you go with these IDs towards, let's say, poor areas, they simply say, go away with your green IDs. We first need to make sure that at least we can send our kids to school. And as long as the European Union don't prioritize these things and don't listen to the real needs of people, then there might be a big problem with that. Then you have the free trade paradox of the left and the right, where the right says that where the left first and for all says that there is too much free trade, and that the European Union is that the globalization, because of the European Union, is destroying the social structure. The right is saying that is saying the contrary, but in the end, the only thing you do is making the extremists and the racist parties, they only grow with that because free trade is actually the very basic point and very basic existence of our union. Budgetary discipline is also something that is easily misused by a lot of countries. For example, Hungary and Italy, as I said, when they don't have their own national budget in order, and when they do corruption and strange things, now they have the common, they can put the blame on the European Union, which they too easily do. And of course, related to that, they're only talking about the positives and communicate, they're only taking the positives and communicating about the negatives, which the media does also. For example, in Belgium, they only show the people like the European Union is only bullying the people with like the small details and new agricultural quota, which only increases the price, for example. And yeah, we definitely need to stop doing that. The focus from the European Union is a bit too much, to my opinion, on value-based issues. You know, you have the very important value-based issues like LGBTI rights, equal rights for men and women, make sure that your election list is equal. Of course, this is very important, but sometimes I have the feeling, even as a progressive person, I openly say this, that there is too much of these issues being discussed right now, and people feel like there are no other topics that the European Union is taking care about. They see that their salary is going down, they see their pension system being ripped away, they see their social security being taken away, and then they see that we implement new LGBTI rights, or that we are fighting for no, maybe I should put it that way, that we don't take a good lady on a position because the law says that we need to take a man, or the other way around. And of course, we need to have this kind of quota, don't get me wrong. But sometimes the communication about these things is slightly wrong. But okay. Then the most important thing, this was also the point of my topic actually, the general lack of knowledge from people in the European Union. There was a study made by the Eurobarometer where they posed 3 very simple questions to people from different age groups. They did it with 6,000 people. So the first one was: the European Union currently consists of 28 member states. The members of the European Parliament are directly elected by the citizens of each member state, and Switzerland is a member state of the EU. So to us, quite easy questions, but the results were actually quite dramatic. Also, with young people, if you see that less than 20% had all 3 answers correct. Of course, there was a big difference in the different European countries, but congratulations to the Netherlands. This is quite bad, to be honest. But okay, just to show you that even those 3 simple questions cannot be answered correctly, and even when you see that that people don't even have, like 20% of the people don't even have 1 correct answer. Okay, now we need to make sure that we have some very simple introductory education in the schools. But that's a long story. Now we're going to shift towards the European elections as such. Let me take something that I have to say about that stuff. As I already said, the pan-European issues are almost absent during campaigns because people are only interested, politicians are only interested in their national interest. In Belgium, for example, the European elections are on the same day as the national elections and the regional elections. To my opinion, horrible. Certainly in Belgium, we have obligatory voting, which only means that people are really voting the same on the national level and on the European level. They don't even know what is going on the European level. A solution for that can be to create a transnational candidate list, so that we at least can vote for candidates all over the European Union and pick out the best one. Of course, the difficult part with that is that the most powerful countries like Germany will always have the upper hand in that, and most of the important candidates will come from their side. That's of course true. But in the end of my presentation, I will propose an idea which we will also discuss about dividing the European Union into federal states. I'm open to this idea, but it's good to discuss this because it's actually a very difficult topic if this will be beneficial for Europe or not. Then, of course, you have the national politicians who prevent EU solutions. As I already said, in the Council of Ministers, they try to block stuff that has been already discussed in the European Parliament. And then you see that they prevent European solutions from taking shape, and that they are only happy, and that they are happy to pass the buck onto Brussels and say that the EU has once again failed. For us here as young people, the next point is quite important, is that we need to have committed individuals in these positions in the European Parliament. And this also means that we need to make sure that our European lists are more young. First and for all, an example that I had from a friend of mine in Finland, because they only have very little MEPs, I guess, 10 or 12, I don't know anymore. So for them, it's very, very important to have committed individuals, because mostly a party only has 1 or 2 MEPs. So if you don't have a person that really wants to do something for Europe, then you can completely forget it. And then the media won't be even interested anymore. I also need to make sure that your European Parliament doesn't become an elephant graveyard. In Belgium, we're very good in that. We're always sending our politicians who have been voted away by the people in the national elections, we send them to the European Parliament. And then, of course, people say this is just a well-paid exit from your political career, even though we already voted you away in the previous national elections. So we need more young people, because I guess we are the very first generation who know the importance of European integration. We have been in contact with so many different cultures. And I guess we will be also the very first politicians who will be able to create new treaties and new agreements. We will be able to make them in a way that is acceptable for all the other parties, because we know the differences between the countries. We have talked through Erasmus Plus with people from other countries, and now we come together and make new agreements, which will be way more accepted by national governments as well, because we understand the difficulties, we understand the cultural backgrounds more. So I guess this is a very positive thing for me to see, and I really, really hope that European Union continues to invest in Erasmus Plus and in this kind of things, because this will be the key to actually get rid of most of the problems that we have, that I have pointed out previously. As we already said, it's a problem of the nationalists with 28 national elections rather than one European one. And the problem in the countries is that there is actually Euroscepticism from the national left and the right in the very center. As I already pointed out, one of our party presidents said that he doesn't have anything good to say about Europe. And even in the parties that are supposed to understand the importance of Europe, even they want to return to the safety of their national sovereignty, and that's certainly what you saw during the COVID crisis, that even progressive left parties like my own said, like, there is no time for Europe now. Europe doesn't have anything to say right now. This is a national, really, they literally said that, this is a national health crisis. So even in a pandemic, even in the worst possible global issue, still those progressive politicians say, no, this is better solved on a national level. I also saw it in the solidarity with, for example, in the beginning of the crisis, where you had Italian hospitals that were full. We didn't take anyone. We just, even though we didn't have any problem yet, we were just like, close the borders, that's it. And it's a sort of I don't know what it is, a sort of nostalgic feeling for this protective role of the sovereign national state. And of course, some of the austerity policies and the fiscal discipline that has been imposed by the European Union has also made that the center parties cannot explain or don't want to explain these issues anymore to their electorate, so they just choose the easy solution on that. Another problem is that the legislative process in Europe is not sexy at all. It's complex, it's technocratic, it's opaque. So that's maybe something to discuss, um, how we can make sure that we have a sort of national um, body, a neutral, non-political body who can translate these European um, big ideas into national, tangible changes for the people. Political careers are still made on the national level. Let's be honest, for young people like myself, getting a good place on the European list, getting a place on the European list in general is a very hard thing to do. You need to be very, very dedicated to the European ID to even to want to continue in this process, because first and for all, since we have elections on the same day, you don't get any support whatsoever from your national party. All the money goes to the national and the regional elections, and there is nothing whatsoever. The what was I about to say? Um, well, I just lost it. Also, yeah, the uh, the the people who are mostly getting elected are ex-ministers or people who already were in national parliament before, so they are almost sure that they will be elected because of, certainly in Belgium, because of the system. When you are on the first two places of the list, you don't need to campaign whatsoever because of the waterfall system. People nowadays don't feel related anymore um, to the people on the list. They just vote for the ancient parties, let's put it this way. And it doesn't matter anymore that the preferential votes, people vote for the list, the waterfall system. So even your leaders don't campaign anymore. They're actually more supporting the campaign of the national leader who will become the prime minister than their own European campaign. And as a young person, this is quite demotivating, because really you have to do everything yourself. Of course, it's still politics. You always have to do things yourself. But yeah, we need to work on that. And I guess having the European elections on a different day is already a first step in that process. Um, there's a big problem that there is no assessment of the performances of the MEPs anymore. Let me just check. Yeah. So people don't feel related anymore with what is happening in the European Parliament. There is no way they can keep those people accountable anymore because it's far away from what is really happening in their countries. A big idea is that's something we need to discuss is about the Grand Coalition. So the Grand Coalition between the center left and the center right in the European Parliament is something that always prevented us from these extremes and these extreme votes in Parliament, and also as a consequence of that in the member states. But as a matter of fact, because people feel less related to the mainstream parties and they vote more for the new kind of ideas, is it still a safe way to protect Europe? To my opinion, yes, because you make sure that these anti-European votes can never have the upper hand. But on the other hand, you're just not listening to the people. And once again, this Grand Coalition was saved by the young voters. So now, as for me, as socialists and Democrats, we need to make sure that we rewrite our story and don't get stuck in this comfortable position that we will always be in power. A solution that was proposed by some people is that there needs to be a national denomination in European positions, because for now, of course, the strong countries like Germany have the majority in the important European positions. But on the other hand, even if you even if you have like a quota that you need to have people from every country in those positions, you still remain with the same problem that those people will be chosen by the strongest party in the European Parliament anyhow, so they will always function for the big countries. To my opinion, this won't solve anything, but that is also something we can discuss if some people have another opinion on that. What we tried to solve the previous problem is by implementing the Spitzenkandidat as a solution, where every political party in every political group in the European Parliament presented his own candidate, but in the end, once again, it's only the candidates who are backed by the strong countries that can have this position, and the other people, the people that are not from the same nationality as that person, don't relate to them at all. And to be honest, this is the second time that they tried, and they don't see a significant change in people feeling related to the European elections. What about the next European elections? So, as we already said, the voters abandoned the traditional mainstream parties, and the parties were actually established based on identities and faith and class, and they have largely lost their relevance in post-industrial societies. And because of that also, this grand coalition and these rigid forms of big parties is maybe not where we're supposed to go to, also because we're now living in more fluid societies, where jobs have changed, where people are more mobile. And also you hear that, for example, people from Romania who are working in Spain, even they say there is no common, we don't feel represented in Spain for our European rights. So this internal European migration doesn't actually function right. So let alone the integration, the migration that comes from outside of Europe. So this is definitely something that we need to tackle, is that people feel at home and basically feel European in every single country, and are also treated as a European citizen. Now, for the next elections and the past two elections, I guess, there is a lost link between the representative and the represented. And because of this loss of trust, there was a further decline in the media coverage from the European elections. And as we saw in 2019, as I saw, there was almost 30% less media coverage on the European elections than in 2014. And this is just because of the fact that because of the social media coverage and these political developments, the social media has actually made the link between these representatives and the represented even weaker. And paradoxically, actually, the rise of those nationalist parties has actually created the first opening for turning the next European election campaign into a truly transnational debate about the future of Europe, where we will return to the big ideas like we had in the phase where we were all agreeing on integration and we were just disagreeing on the way we were about to do it. But the problem is so we had the good idea of implementing the Future of Europe conference, which was supposed to start in 2020, but because of the corona crisis, it was postponed. But the problem is that it will be still a very elitary group of people who will discuss about those general ideas, which will be very good, but will be little tangible for the man in the street. So this is also something which I want to discuss with you, is how do you think we can solve this elitary, once again, this elitary conference, because it's always the same, that we are talking towards ourselves and we really think that we are changing the European Union, but in the end, we actually create our own echo chamber of pro-European ideas, which can be very, very good. And certainly with the European Green Deal, those ideas are very, very good. But this doesn't mean that all the people know what you're doing, and this doesn't mean that it's also beneficial for everyone. So we need to open up that debate. This is my second to last slide. What we specifically need to change in the electoral system. So first and for all, we need a common European electoral law, because now in all the different member states, the electoral laws are very, very different. First and for all, in some countries you can vote from 18 years old, in other countries you can only vote for the European Parliament elections from 21 years old. So we need to make sure that this is unified. There are many other topics that we can discuss maybe later on this electoral law. And also something which I want to know your opinion about is the obligatory voting. For my personally, I'm in favor of obligatory voting, because at least you oblige the media at least a little bit to take some time to discuss some topics from the European level. You also oblige people to at least know that there is a European election, because I saw some numbers in some other European countries where only 12% of the people knew that there was a European election. On the contrary, a lot of people are afraid that people who don't want to go voting vote for extremists just because they need to vote. It's like actually a protest vote, because they don't want to be obliged for this. But I guess it's your public duty, it's your individual duty as a citizen to go voting. So for me, I'm in favor of that. But for example, in the Netherlands, we already abolished this in 1870, I guess. You had it for a very short period of time. So maybe how do you look as young people towards obligatory voting or not? Do we need to have a direct election of the Commission president? I would say somewhere in the middle, because yes, of course, this would be very good that we can at least elect the leader of our European government directly. And as you saw, even though, for example, now with von der Leyen, she's very good. She's even better than I might have expected before. But of course, she didn't run in the elections. So you have a democratic deficit there, which is easy for Eurosceptical parties to fight upon, obviously. The thing is, she's the best person. So the fact that she is a consensual person, mostly in the European atmosphere, is always a good person who is decent and who does her job well. If you make this into a direct election, you can have more career politicians who come into this position. You can have populists. This is, of course, a difficult topic. So the thing is, will the problem remain the same if you directly elect the Commission president? Because in the end, somebody needs to choose who will be on top of that list anyhow, and it will be the big parties in the parliament. So is there anything that's going to change? I don't really know. The problem is that we still nowadays have national lists, and because of that, the national parties still decide on the candidates. They choose the electoral program. They run under their name, their own finance, their own campaign. And because of that, politicians, they only cater to purely their national electorate. They only tackle national issues, and they keep the national interest of the member states at stake in a European campaign. Nowadays, European parties only serve the European Parliament. They don't serve the citizens. So we really need European elections where there is a general interest for all citizens. And then we need to make sure that those parties have constituencies that are EU-wide and that are not just the sum of national constituencies. And only this way it will oblige national politicians to propose solutions that are in the benefit of all EU citizens. And to do so, we need to create pan-European parties. I was actually sad that I only found this beautiful picture of the EPP. My own party didn't make something that beautiful. They only made it into a boring list. So the benefits of that is that you can recognize the Euro parties as entities which European citizens can have direct membership of. You can recognize the single national party as a national branch of the Euro party. You can allow cross-financing between the Euro party and the national branches. The European election will be carried out with the name and the logo of the Euro parties. And this also makes sure that we have an upfront campaign and that the public subsidies are ensured in close scrutiny and that every single expense is ensured that it was used for the benefit of the European elections. The last two slides are just two ideas that I got from the European study unit in the Parliament. So this is open for debate, as I said. I don't know if this is good or not. They propose that there is a presidential election for the president of the European Party, for the president of the European Commission. God, I had a long day. For 6 years, but that the half of the MEPs are elected every 3 years in the whole of Europe. So not as the American system, where half of the states or half of the federal districts, as we want to do it in Europe, elect them, but an election every 3 years. I think that's a bit too much, because then the MEPs will only run on even shorter IDs, and they won't even bother anymore about the big issues that Europe needs to bother about. They will, to my opinion, only be more reluctant to return to national issue, because that's the only way they can score in such a short notice. So I want to open up the debate about that, what you think about this. And then also they want to create a sort of Senate, which has full powers. So this means that for now, the European Parliament only has the power to say yes or no to certain legislation that is proposed by the Council of Ministers. They can only make some adjustments to it, but they don't have any right to impose new legislature. So a Senate would solve that problem. The solution they propose is a federal Europe, which I am in big favor of. So this means that we get rid of the national borders to do so. We have 350 directly elected officials per federal district in the normal way as we do it now with national party lists, and then we have statewide pan-European lists with 350 party representatives, which are on a pan-European list, which you can vote for. It's up to you to discuss if this is a good thing or not. I'm more in favor of this system, a bit less of the previous one with 3 years and a Senate, but we're here to discuss, and this was my last slide, so that was it. And also, I also maybe one thing to add, I also want to hear from you if you actually feel like you have a pan-European identity, because of course this has been blamed by a lot of Eurosceptical people that there is not such a thing as a European identity. And for example, Coudenhove-Kalergi in his pan-European plan in 1929, he is always misquoted that people think that he wanted to get rid of your national identity and your cultural uniqueness. This is not the case. We just need to make sure that we make the shift from a difference in people and a difference in races towards a difference in individuals. And when you have a difference in individual, I guess it's more easy to feel yourself as a pan-European citizen.
Thank you very much, Maxim, for this wonderful presentation and your insight.